The Hasidic masters refer to Noach as, in Yiddish, as a Tzadik in pelts.
Mm-hmm.
A tzaddik, a righteous person who wears a fur coat. Meaning, there are two ways you can keep yourself warm when it's cold.
Mm-hmm.
You can build a fire,
Yeah.
or you can put on a nice fur coat.
That's right.
The difference is, obviously, the fur coat, you keep yourself warm, everyone else freezes.
That's right.
You build a fire, you do some work,
Yeah.
you include...
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Rebelli. We're back after a long break over the Chagim. All the Chagim were on Wednesday, so we we took a break. It's good to take a break. Actually, I don't regret it, but it's also good to be back in our Seder Kavua Wednesday mornings. And for those of you who have watched our channel and studied with us before, we're going to change the format a little bit. And we'll experiment. But what we're thinking right now is, instead of just doing one Rebbe, we're going to do a discussion about a pasuk, a verse in the Parsha, and have some discussion, and then go to our Hasidic Rebbe of choice of any given week. So this week, if we get to it, we have the Sfat Emet again, but we will be looking at different Hasidic masters and bringing the Hasidic, like the particular flavor, particular kind of spiritual philosophy of the Hasidic masters to bear on the Parsha of each week. And what I want to show you is the pasuk that we're going to work with today, and that's going to be Parshat Noah. Obviously Noach, and the pasuk is right up here, and possible commentary on the bottom. So Eve toldot Noach ish Tzadik tamim haya bedorotav, et Elohim hithalech Noach. And the translation is, this is the line of Noach. Noach was a righteous man. He was blameless in his age, and Noach walked with God. And for the commentary, if when we get to it, I want to recommend that if you want to have the text in front of you, you go to sefaria.org, and you can watch our video and also have the text in front of you on in a separate window.
And if you're looking at the screen where you see the pasuk, it says, these are the generations of Noach. Noach was a righteous person, a sincerely righteous person, Tzadik Tamim, Tamim meaning sincere, Haya B'dairai Sav. He was a perfectly righteous person in his times. So this is a feast for rabbis who jump at the minutiae of the words that are chosen in the Torah. And this is a very strange way to say this sentence. He was a righteous. What do you mean in his times? So why does the Torah have to put in his generation? So as usual, the rabbis have a disagreement. What does this mean? This is a famous Rashi, the premier commentator of the Torah, brings it from the Talmud. But this is actually from the Gemara, as you see, from the tractate Sanhedrin. And this is a machlekes, a difference of opinion between Rabbi Yechanan and Reish Lakish, who were always having friendly arguments with each other. Reish Lakish said, this is a praise. The Torah said this to praise Noach. Why? Even in the generation that Noach lived, which was filled up with wickedness and wicked people doing wicked things, he maintained his independent thought. He was an independent thinker, and he rejected, even though the overwhelming majority was acting in horrible ways, he rejected that, and he was righteous even in a terrible generation. Comes his friend Rabbi Yechanan and says, Reish Lakish, what are you talking about? It's the opposite. It's to show, it's to his discredit that the Torah adds the word in his generation. What does it mean?
Yep.
In a generation like he lived in, filled up with shmegegis and no goodniks, he comes out smelling okay. But if he would have lived in a time with normal people,
right,
like if you would size him up next to someone like Abraham or someone like Moses,
right,
and the door day of the Midbar, he will come out a nachash megegi, like a low life guy. He wasn't such a great guy. He was He was a, what do they say, meh. He was a meh kind of a guy. But because
that's Einstein's theory of relativity.
exactly. So the question we have today, Reb Ruvain, which I'm going to just put this out there as a general question, and then we can go to all the Hasidic, whatever pops in. The question is like this. We don't find this anywhere where the holy sages go out of their way to say Lashon Hara on one of the great figures. I mean, in his merit, the whole world was saved. He was a pretty big, righteous person. And yet, half the opinions here are that he wasn't such a good guy. Why do they have to tell us he wasn't such a good guy? What was his issue? They don't tell us why, by the way. We have to figure out what was so maybe not so great about him. Well, why do some rabbis say he was great? Some say he wasn't so great. What are they really arguing about? You know, even by King David, by the way. King David, one of the greatest figures of Jewish history. But if you look in the Bible, there are some stories about King David that aren't so right? Spying on women, bathing, and sending guys out to get killed so he can back. All kinds of crazy stories about King David. And the Talmud, the same Talmud says, anyone says anything bad about King David, he's a apikuris, he's a heretic, he's a this, he's a that. So they go out of their way to dan l'kav zchut, to judge favorably. But here comes this guy Noach, who seems to be pretty good, and they go out of the way to knock him down. So what in the world is happening here? So I'll put that out to you, Reb Ruvain. What are your thoughts?
I wonder, if it has to do, because when the rabbis talk about, the comparison is to the time of Abraham Avinu. So they say, at his time, he was a great tzaddik, but at the time of Abraham Avinu, he would be a minor tzaddik, because he didn't live up to the greatness of Abraham. So maybe they didn't want to put him down. They wanted actually to elevate Abraham, is what I'm thinking,
Oh, that's very interesting. That's very interesting to show what a superior figure Abraham was. So they made this comparison. The Haftarah, the additional reading from the prophets this Shabbos, which usually has to have something to do with the Torah portion, is from Isaiah. And Isaiah, the prophet Isaiah, says a very unusual term. He says, quoting God, he says, it is like Mei Noach to me. It is like the waters of Noach, referring to the flood. And the Zohar says, Mei Noach.
What is that?
Isaiah, why are you, it's almost like you're blaming Noach for the flood. Not only are you putting him down, you're saying he caused the flood. What are you talking about? God said, only you, I'm saving in your family and the animals. Everyone else, we're wiping him out. And you're calling it the waters of Noach? So all the Hasidic masters say like this. God told Noach, I'm saving you, everyone else is toast. I'm giving you 120 years to build a boat. 120 years, I could build a boat in a month, 2 months. Why 120 years? So the sages say to give Noach a chance to help the people repent. People were supposed to come back to Noach. What are you doing over there? I'm building a big boat. Why? Well, you guys are totally messed up. You have to get your act together and in those days people lived long lives, very long lives. So you have a couple of years, you got to get yourselves together because God is destroying the world because you guys are so terrible. Okay, great. The problem is that over the course of 120 years, guess how many Balei Tshuva, guess how many repentants Noach made?
He wasn't so successful, basically. Yeah.
Zero. The
Yeah.
big fat donut, bagel.
Yeah.
The Hasidic masters refer to Noach as, in Yiddish, as a Tzadik in pelts. A tzaddik, a righteous person who wears a fur coat. Meaning, there are two ways you can keep yourself warm when it's cold. You can build a fire,
Yeah.
or you can put on a nice fur coat.
Right.
The difference is, obviously, the fur coat, you keep yourself warm, everyone else freezes.
That's right.
You build a fire, you do some work,
Yeah.
you include... He represented the type of person that recognizes the truth. He recognizes what's important in life. He recognizes the faults of the way people are behaving, the injustices that he sees, and he saves himself. He keeps himself away from the culture,
Yeah.
from the injustices of the times, but he doesn't do anything to help.
He doesn't get involved. He doesn't get his hands dirty,
He
basically.
doesn't get his hands dirty. He's not willing to jump in and see what he can do, jump into the fray,
Yeah. Yeah.
and try and influence people's hearts and minds to his way of thinking about why it's bad to steal and why it's bad to act immorally.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So it seems like he wanted to save himself. Okay, fine, God, I'll save myself. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
I am a good guy. Thank you.
Yeah. So this goes right to the to the other word toledot in the verse there, and actually, so this is a good segue to the Sfat Emet.
Beautiful.
Because what Sfat Emet is going to tell us, and we'll read it in a moment, is that every person should have toledot. Toledot means birth something or put something into the world. In other words, every person should be a mashpia, should be some hashpa'ah. And the rabbis say Noah was a tzaddik, but he didn't have hashpa'ah. He didn't have an impact on other people, on the surrounding. But that's what you think. So I think it's a good segue into that, because the whole idea of having toladot, because the verse says, let me share the screen here. So the verse says, Ele toladot Noach. This is the line of Noach, right? And then the rabbis ask, what does that word toladot mean? So the simple is
children.
So the simple of toladot is progeny, right? So, and after this verse, it's going to say he had these children, Shem, Cham, Yefet, etc. But the rabbis say, the Sfat Emet is going to say, toledot does not only mean children, but it means anything that you need to bring forth into the world. It doesn't have to be biological children. It could be your works. And in fact, I think Rashi says that the children, the toledot of the tzaddikim are mitzvot and masim tovim, right? So, so that's, what they put into the world is their spiritual practice and their good deeds and their exactly what you're saying. So,
right, beautiful. And just before you get, because you mentioned before you get into the Sfas Emes, you mentioned before about the comparison to Avraham Avinu, to Abraham. And it's very interesting along those lines that Noach, for all his greatness and goodness, he was not chosen by God to be the first Jew. Whereas Abraham was. And we see, in contrast to Noach, who did not get himself involved to try to have hashpa'ah, as you said, to try and have influence on his generation, we see by Abraham the exact opposite. When God told him that he was going to destroy the 5 towns, the Sodom and Gomorrah, and the other towns there that were acting like the generation of the flood, these specific towns, when he told him that, Abraham did not just accept and go, okay, thanks, okay, whatever you got to do, go do it, take care of business. He said, no, here we find the first arguer with God in the great Hasidic tradition.
Right.
He said, God, no, what are you talking about? Maybe there's some good people there. Did you like go to every door? Are you sure? Maybe 100, maybe 50. He's like bargaining rate, like a good Jewish guy. But we see from the story that he cares about these evil, and they were real evil. If you think the people of the flood were evil, these people, I mean, Sodom and Gomorrah, right? Immortalized in their evilness, right? And yet, to this day, and yet Abraham didn't want to see them get killed.
Yeah, because he wasn't only for himself; he was really for
exactly, and that's why he was chosen to be the first, the initiator of the Jewish experiment, of the Jewish idea.
And you know what's interesting about this rebellion is that it's not that he wasn't only for himself; he wasn't only for his own family. He was really universal. So he's the first Jew. Right. He's really also the first universalist because he cares about all human beings, even Sodom and Gomorrah, that were antithetical to his philosophy.
Monotheistic. And,
even them, he had compassion and wanted, and bargained with God. The real tzaddik negotiates,
Right.
And a Jew negotiates. A Jew doesn't say, doesn't just submits. Obviously, we submit. I submit to God's will, hopefully, but I also question.
Yeah.
And I even question God. And then God says, "Nitzchuni banai nitzchuni," right? And the Gemara it says, God says, my children have prevailed over me.
Right.
This is a beautiful. This took us to a beautiful place.
Right.
But
it's interesting. That's beautiful. It's interesting. It could be that's why after the flood we find that Noach, instead of picking up the pieces, the broken pieces of the world, and jumping right into rebuilding in the model, evidently his head was on straight before the flood. He knew the difference between right and wrong. That was the whole point. But after the flood, we find he disintegrates. He becomes a drunkard, and his end is not. His life does not end well, or there's no happy ending. To his survival doesn't result in a rebirth in terms of him. One of his children carries the mantle of righteousness forward. But he himself ends up being a very sad character. So it could be that part of it was based on maybe feelings of guilt. That when he realized, look what I have done, look what I didn't do.
That's right.
My responsibility was not just to save myself and my family. My responsibility was to try to save humankind.
That's right. So, Rebelli, before we wrap it up, I have a question for you that's popped in my mind. I wonder what you think. You told us that he was building an ark for 120 years, right? The rabbis teach to have a demonstration, right? To have people ask the question, and then he can tell them, there's consequences to the way you're living. And this is to, I'm warned. This is a warning. This is an alert. And we are living at a time where there are consequences to the ecological, to the way we're mismanaging the ecology. And I wonder what is the Noah's Ark? What in our day would be this, the sign, the demonstration that we better, change our ways. I don't know the answer. I'm really putting it out to our viewers as well. What's calling us today to change our ways? There's a parallel. The floods are in some, a little bit literally and somewhat figuratively, the floods are already beginning, right? The sea rising and all that. So I'm making a little bit of parallel from Noah to today. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I would say this is tricky because it depends on if we've swallowed the red pill or the blue pill, how you're going to answer that question, because we all come to the scene with confirmation biases.
Let's come from the pink the pink pill.
Is that what you do when you mix
It makes
red
them
and
look
blue? Is pink?
something like that. I don't know. I just,
I thought maybe purple. I don't know.
purple. Okay, yeah, the
I
purple.
don't know.
Yeah,
I was, I fell asleep that day in science class, and when they
but I just wonder. I mean, Noah. I mean, clearly, there was a prophet or a tzaddik, who said, "Hey, there's going to be consequences." And I feel like in our day, who's our Noah? What's the teva? It's like I personally, as somebody who's interested in the ecology and for many many years, and lover of nature, and hateva is gematria, is the numerical value of Elohim. It's like clearly in our
right.
tradition. God speaks to us from within creation, from within the teva, the nature, and are we managing, are we good stewards of the earth, of the nature that, from a religious point of view, God has deposited right in our hands. um, I think
Yeah,
that's a part of
absolutely.
it. I don't know the answer, but just wanted to bring.
Abs- Absolutely. Just last week, at the very beginning of creation, God told the first humans, male and female, that they were put on earth, l'shamra ula'abda, la'abda l'shamra, to be stewards of the earth, to take care of the earth. And, the behaviors of even the generation of Noah already saw
Yeah,
failure
yeah,
on many scores.
yeah.
Uh, Overall, to answer your question, I would answer your question like this, without trying to be cagey or evasive. The Baal Shem Tov says that the Teva, which means ark in Hebrew, has a double meaning.
Yeah,
In Hebrew, the word Teva also means word,
yeah,
a word. And he said it alludes to the ultimate words, which are words of tefillah and Torah, words of the
kedusha.
Bible study,
Yeah,
of and prayer.
yeah,
So he says that the Baal Shem Tov said that sometimes we are inundated with the floods of the worries of the world, whether they be worries about making a living, or all the depressing
yeah,
news
yeah,
that we're bombarded with daily. A lot of it having to do with issues that you were just ecological and climate issues,
yeah.
and a person can be overwhelmed, inundated, flooded with negativity.
Hmm.
So he says the answer is to ba elateva, enter yourself into the world, into the words, into the world of Torah, mitzvos, enter into a spiritual journey, of a Jewish spiritual journey, if you're a Jewish
Hmm.
person, and that will float you above. You'll be in it, but you'll be above it in
Right.
terms of your mental, psychological state. You'll be able to deal with it,
Yeah,
because you'll be coming from the perspective of Torah lenses.
right. And
But then
apropos, yeah,
yeah, just to
yeah,
finish the thought. But the Baal Shem Tov says, but then there comes a time when you fortified yourself with the words of Torah and prayer,
yeah.
and you're grounded in your Judaism. Then the Torah says, "Say minateva."
Hmm.
Once
Leave
you've
the
got
world.
the tool,
Yeah,
go out of the teva,
yeah,
back into the world,
yeah.
and use your tools, what
Right.
you've learned. And
Yeah,
this is what Noah didn't do properly. This
yeah,
was his problem, and affect and influence
yeah.
the entire everyone and everything, and you can
That's
make
right.
a difference
That's right. That's right.
in the world. Whatever your thing, whatever your topic is that you're involved with, whatever you feel needs to be worked on in this world. Now you've got the tools
Yeah.
to go take care of that.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, this is a very good place to wrap it up. And I want to recommend for people who, especially if you're, have some already skill and interest in the Hasidic texts, and I'm going to share our source sheet once again. Go look up Sfat Emet on Noach, where he talks about another meaning of what it means to be a tzaddik. And the word Noach there means to rest, and that alludes to Shabbat and the practice of withdrawing and what you just said, Rebelli, about withdrawing into Torah and spiritual practice and spirituality. And look at Noam Elimelech also. The sources are here where he talks about the word Dorot and Dorotav, generations. And he says a door is actually a state of mind. So each generation is like a state of mind. And he says Noach was a tzaddik because in any state of mind he was, in any door, he still was hitalech im Elohim. He was walking with God, and that's what made him a tzaddik. So look those up. Yeah, it's beautiful. Shtikalach, we don't have time to look at the Hebrew right now together. But I think we've covered all those really in the conversation here. Just in the course of conversation. And again, I want to thank everybody for being here. If you're here for the first time, do subscribe to the channel, give us a like, and leave a comment. Subscribe, why not? It doesn't cost you anything. It's meaningful to us. So we can keep in touch, and God willing, we will see you again next Wednesday morning. Have a good Shabbos and a good week, and we will see you next week.